Hello. I don't really think it feels like Friday to anyone anymore. So happy day to you. We are headed into the weekend in case you didn't know. So if you're working, just so you know, like tonight is Friday night, you probably have tomorrow off. Although you're not leaving your house, so it doesn't really feel like it. Anyway, I'm not helping things. My name is Chrissy, and I am the founder of OCD Gamechangers and executive director. I'm also a certified peer support specialist here in the state of Colorado, doing support worldwide and also referral consultations to get people connected to therapists who treat OCD. I'm also the author of Pure OCD, the invisible side of obsessive compulsive disorder. And today we are so excited and lucky to have John Hershfield on the show. Yay! So John, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone who may not know you, because you know everyone knows you. But just in case there's one person out there, go ahead.
Yes, well, I am indeed John Hershfield, which we covered. I'm the director of the OCD and Anxiety Center of Greater Baltimore in Hunt Valley, Maryland. And basically, as a profession, I go online and hang out with my friends and talk about how life used to be. That's sort of what we do now. No, I'm kidding. I am the author or co-author of the Mindfulness Workbook for OCD and several other books on OCD. And yeah, and actually it's not true. Things have still been pretty busy. It's interesting seeing people talk about how bored they are, or how, this is the time that they're learning a new language or doing all these things that that people are doing when they have lots of free time, but actually haven't had that much more free time than before. I'm not commuting, so there's that. You were just joking about the weekend. The weekends are like really long now because there's no like kids' birthday parties or sporting events or like things that kind of break up the time. So that's when I'm noticing the most of like, should I write something? Should I, watch an extra movie or do an art thing with the kids or something like that? Mm-hmm. So yeah, these are interesting times indeed. But thanks for having me on the. Well, first of all, thanks for having me at Gamechangers, which is like the last time I traveled, maybe forever.
The last time life felt at all like you could hug someone and not feel guilty.
I remember we were talking about it, and it was already starting to get a little bit weird. I remember you had made a comment about, if people wanted to shake hands, they could. They didn't have to. It wouldn't be viewed as compulsive if they didn't want to. And I was still in that headspace of, I'm a person who shakes hands, and until I'm told I'm not supposed to, I'm a person who shakes hands. Mm-hmm. And then it was just a couple of days later, I was like listening to a podcast or something like that, and the the podcaster was like, "The time for shaking hands is over." I was like, "Wait a second here," and I started thinking about it a little bit more seriously, and then things just escalated exponentially from there. And so by that Friday, I was calling all of my patients and telling them, we're all teletherapy all the time, and that's what it's been since then. This is my new office.
We got so lucky. We got so lucky to be able to have the event right before the world shut down.
Yeah. It's been quite a surreal experience. And then, I was supposed to speak on several panels at ADAA earlier in March, and then that was canceled. And who knows what's coming next, but that's the whole point of being mindful, is you just have to keep coming back to the present and experiencing things as they are. I'm lucky. For me, things are great. Actually, I have more time with my family. Obviously I'm constantly going through some sort of, I don't know how to describe it, not in a clinical sense, trauma, but it feels traumatic to me. It's like constantly, that it's like, every once in a while I'll forget that this is happening, and I'll think I'm just working from home because it's a snow day or something. And then I'll remember, oh wait, no, it's happening because of this. Let me check the death count. Yep, really happening.
Yeah.
And that's just interesting, the impact that it has on me. It kind of really keeps bringing me back to this state of, okay, my job is to be here now, to model how to cope with big things to my children, right? To behave the way I want my children to see me, which isn't aloof. I mean, I've been pretty open with them about this is a scary thing, and we're doing everything we can to be safe. And, you know, sometimes we have to deal with big uncertainties and things like that. And only a few temporary moments of just kind of feeling overwhelmed, because it's just still like, I don't know, didn't see this coming. Everything feels like uncharted territory, redefining how I do my work. I mean, I'm used to doing teletherapy. I'm licensed in 3 states. Probably about a third of my practice was on teletherapy already.
What's the third state?
Virginia.
California, Virginia?
Yeah.
California. Why didn't I know this, John?
Because I didn't want you to send me clients. I've been full for a long time. I've been keeping it from you.
The truth comes out.
Yeah, sorry. You know, so this was like, okay, so now it's more teletherapy, but I miss my office. I miss my routine.
Yes.
The irony being, of course, that I'm leading a way healthier life than I was before. I was always kind of rushing around, always kind of just barely showing up for things on time, and coming home really tired, really stressed, seeing my kids for about 20 minutes before, you know, they had to get to bed, which is like the worst time to know your children. That's something they're at their worst.
In the midst of exhaustion.
And it's like, it's bedtime. It's like I'm always seeing them at the time where they don't want to be doing what they're doing. And now I see them periodically throughout the day, which is really nice. And things are moving a little bit slower, and, you know, I'm taking more time to think about what I'm eating, or if I'm, you know, what kind of exercising I'm doing and things like that. So I still want to go back to my other lifestyle, but I can't deny the fact that this is a healthier lifestyle. It's probably better for my mental health too. So, and who knows, I might have the wrong thought and bring the pandemic back after it leaves, just because of this selfish need to feel good. Yeah.
I was thinking to myself, and I'm just going to say I was a bit compulsive about counting the days until there was an outbreak in Denver, and thinking about the ironic headline of OCD event, you know, causes, you know, pandemic in Colorado.
Right.
How
big
the irony
hotspot.
of that.
Yeah, that's not the kind of game changer you want to be. Yeah.
That would really change the game.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed.
No, I'm glad that you I have a couple things that I want to continue to talk about, but one would be, if and when we venture back into the new normal, and I'm going to say the new normal because it's not going to be normal the way that we used to see it, and it's not going to be that way for a long time. And I think people are misguided in thinking we're going to quarantine for 3 or 4 weeks and then yay life, and everybody's going to flood the restaurants. That's not how it's going to be. These type of behaviors we're developing are not just going to go away on their own. As we know, as people who have OCD, treat OCD, support people with OCD, it's when you develop those kind of response behaviors, they're not just going to be like, oh, look, now we don't have to do this, and now we don't have to wear masks, or, you know, go away from people like they're infected with the plague. My anger's coming out a little. But I wanted to say how I appreciate that you mentioned the trauma aspect of it, because I think it is traumatic for people. And I think that trauma is a word that we don't like to talk about, or we reserve for specific events. But a lot of people are experiencing trauma and feeling like they can't talk about it through this because they're not experiencing abuse. So they don't see themselves as worthy of that. However, they're really having an emotional response to it. So I appreciate that. And we can get back into that. But I did want to ask you, in seeing now how your life has scaled back and slowed down a little bit, and you see these as more healthy behaviors, what do you think your life is going to be like once? And I hate to say like the big lift, like when everything's lifted and life turns back. I mean, it's so weird.
It's going to be a moment, right? It's
it's like, you know, 8 a.m. life begins.
Yeah.
But what do you think that you're going to change, or how are you going to adapt when things kind of ease back into how they were, since you've seen such a difference?
It's a good question. I don't really know. I mean, a lot of it's really going to just depend on what's going on in my profession. I mean, so much of my life is taken up by work, and it's hard to picture myself doing a full teletherapy practice all day, every day. It's not a bad thing, and it's great that I feel like I'm helping people and I'm connecting with people. I'm continuing to support people who, I have lots of clients I'd always seen on teletherapy, and now I have lots of clients who I used to see in the office, and now I see them on teletherapy, and that's a good thing. But there's something about the end of the day where there's something missing. There's something I didn't get out of the experience, just being in the room with someone and holding their pain in that space, in the air, in the actual air,
The connection.
Yeah. And I kind of wonder what that's going to be like when we do start returning to the office and I'm in the room with someone and, they're on the couch and I'm facing them and, maybe I'm just going to sit there in silence for a little bit. I mean, that's what they told me to do in grad school anyway, but it's hard for me to to do that for very long. But I might just have to sit there and savor it and it's kind of like if you've never done teletherapy before, you start the first session, there's a kind of awkwardness, where do I look and how do you navigate pauses and things like that. But then you get used to it. You kind of forget that it's online. I think it's going to be like that, except in the inverse, where I'm going to have to start up that engine that helps me to interact with people who are actually there,
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's okay. I mean, that might actually be a good thing. I might learn a lot about how to help people in that way too, by kind of rediscovering it. I've talked on a lot of different, town halls and podcasts and blogs and stuff about this sense of loss that we're going through. And for me, the biggest loss is just this feeling like, that almost like it's an injustice. It's like, okay, so things have to change, but I don't want them to change now at this time. I want to have some control over the change, which of course I don't. And so you get frustrated. I get angry at the universe when it doesn't do what I told it to. And I wanted my kids to have more time on Earth before this, so that they knew what life was like before this, because there will be an after this, but it will be what life is like after this.
Yes.
And that's okay, but it won't be like what life was like before this. And that's how I feel about a lot of things that happen in politics as well, where it's like, yes, there was a time before this and now there's a time after it. And that's just what happens in life. But will my kids remember what it was like before this? And it's the stupid little things. It's like when I go to shake someone's hand and they give me like a dead fish and I find that I'm just holding their hand like we're on a date and I just met them, there's a special kind of discomfort there that they might be missing out on if we never go back to shaking hands,
I know. I'm grieving that that's a possibility, but not giving in to the idea that that will be the norm for me. And as selfish as that sounds, I think that just to kind of quote Stu when he was on here, just talking about how, people that will lead through this are going to come, they're going to rise from the ashes of it. And I think that's when we're going to need people to come out and start saying that those things, especially in regards to human connection, are going to be okay. Yeah. My fear is that we've already created a divide in how people are going to view this moving forward. There's going to be the people that are, I don't want to touch or get near you ever again. And they might be okay with that. And then they get the human connection from their families or whoever that they need to get that from. And then there's the other people who don't want to walk into a grocery store and have someone look at them like they are disgusting, and like go up against the produce. Like, please don't get near me or else, and the backlash that's going to happen from that is, there is a middle ground. There has to be a middle ground. And how I look at it selfishly is that it's going to have to be personal. which is I am going to go back to hugging. I am going to go back to laughing with people and put my hand on their arm and their shoulder.
Yeah.
And if, of course, I'm going to respect what if people want or don't want it, but I'm going to release the shame of it if someone is like, oh, please don't touch me, because I need that in my life. I have to have that in my life.
Well, and you can have that and also have compassion for somebody who's still reeling from the trauma of this and is afraid to be touched. Yes. And I think those people are probably less likely to have OCD than you'd think. The people I see being the most compulsive right now are not people who had diagnoses of OCD. I mean, it's not been an easy ride for people with OCD by any stretch, but it's the people who are totally new to paying close attention to these details that are going overboard, above and beyond whatever the CDC is recommending. And that kind of new learning is a lot stronger, I think. So when it's no longer necessary, I think it's going to be hard for a lot of people to let go of. And
especially
I think also
with groupthink, because there's such a groupthink around it that you have to do this or else you're killing people, which is so not fair, but okay. That messaging isn't fair. The idea is okay, but the messaging is so not nice.
Well, that's the other part of it too, is that and try to have this discussion without getting overtly political, but it's hard to do.
You can.
I prefer not to.
We need to I've already had a few people say this. We should just have like the non-PC fireside chats and have like a password of like, please don't be offended, to get into them, to listen to them. But anyway, go ahead.
I mean, when you do what we do, it's like there's certain things you want people to know about you because it's helpful, and then there's other things you maybe don't need them to know about you because it complicates the relationship you have with them, and the kind of name that you have for yourself in the professional community. And I love seeing therapists who don't think about that at all and just let it fly. But that's not me. I mean, I already probably over disclose, but I'm pretty strategic in where I over disclose.
Yeah. Anyway, there's a balance because, when you're supporting or treating people, mental illness doesn't discriminate. So the last thing that you want is to establish yourself as I stand here and these are only my people, because that's not true. Like we have to support people regardless.
So, well, and I have a personal Facebook page where I can say whatever I really feel.
But I know, and I love it.
The point I was going to make before is, you're talking about people who are thinking that, they're not going to go back to hugging and shaking hands and things like that because, it was all this human contact that caused this problem. But that's just factually inaccurate. We're not having a pandemic because too many people were hugging and shaking hands. We're having a pandemic because at a scientific level, a virus arose and was transmitted that we have no immunity to, and it spread. And that's how viruses work. And that's how numbers work. Eventually there's going to be another virus. It's going to be just as bad or worse, and we'll have to deal with that too. But it's not like this happened because too many people were shaking their hands. Yes, we had to engage in social distancing so that we could limit the spread of the virus. And before people understood that, we were allowing it to spread so quickly that it became a pandemic. But it didn't show up like an entity, like in a science fiction, like a ghost or something, because of our behavior. And so when this virus has been dealt with in the sense of new people aren't getting infected and we have some kind of protective, vaccine or some other kind of medication, then we should be going back to behaving the way we were. This didn't happen because people weren't being interpersonally hygienic enough. And I think that that there's been a lot of disinformation out there that's gotten this into people's heads. That's also created a lot of animosity, social animosity, and racism and othering and things like that. That's just based on inaccurate, non-scientific nonsense. Mm-hmm. So that's, I think, is something we're just going to have to deal with as a society when this is all over. The people who aren't really letting it be over because they're so convinced that, well, if everybody had just been washing their hands 1,000 times a day, like those funny OCDers, we never would have had coronavirus. Mm. It's just not true, but there are people out there who are thinking that now and are going to continue to think it. So that's not a society I'm looking forward to. But on a lighter note, what I've been telling all my clients about the importance of taking good care of themselves right now is that when this is all over and we are sort of rebuilding society, I want the numbers on our side. I want people who've become really adept at being self-compassionate and mindful and skilled at embracing uncertainty, to be the ones who are re-entering the workforce and the ones that are kind of the representatives of this new society of people who care more about what's going on in the world and care more and maybe work a little bit harder to let the people that you love know that they're loved. Because now we've all had a little bit of time to think about that,
Right. The priority piece. With that said, I know that there's been a lot of information that's gone on in the OCD community, and we are feeling this, where all of a sudden there is a surge of energy from people that are feeling like we cannot deal with these headlines that are saying everybody needs to be OCD right now. And everybody, now this is what it feels like to have OCD, which I can't stand that.
Right.
Even if it's somewhat trying to normalize what we go through, it's nothing like we go through the end. I mean, yes, but no. But with that said, what would be your, and I have a couple other points I want to touch, but before this escapes my mind, what would be your hope as an OCD community and as sort of leaders in our community? How do we want to re-enter the world, and maybe even making a splash about, because I think this can have a really positive impact, and I'm not even a positive person, but I just feel like this is our chance to not only have people somewhat relate to a degree that's out of the control, even though it's not OCD, people are still feeling it and they understand it. And we have this moment to say, to message this somehow as, take this and have that empathy of understanding what a lot of us go through now. 100%, how do we spin that into violent, sexual, intrusive thoughts, for people to understand that? But what can we do as a community to really, take the stand and make the change? I think it can happen. Lots of people don't, but I don't care.
I really admire you and respect you. I don't know that I'm as optimistic as you are. For one thing, as you pointed out, half people with OCD don't even have contamination obsessions. So this whole thing, when it started, immediately people were talking about, on one end, we need to take very special care of people in the OCD community who are going to have a hard time with this. And then on the other side of things, everybody needs to be a little OCD, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. But this pandemic, it's about something bigger than any individual diagnosis. It's about something bigger than having OCD. And I'm not sure worrying a lot about getting it or spreading it teaches you a whole lot about living with OCD. I think it's a very personal experience. And what I hope happens is something that's bigger than an individual diagnosis, but actually applies to everything. It's as big as the pandemic, which is that we just stop judging each other so much. We stop thinking we know something about someone because they have a diagnosis or they come from a specific country or they have a specific way of doing things. We stop assuming that we've got it all figured out and, look at that person, right? And will that make the world a better place for people with OCD? Absolutely. I don't think it's essential that people who don't have OCD need to know what it's like to have OCD, to treat people with OCD with the same love and respect that they treat everybody else. So, there are people with bipolar disorder or PTSD or, you name it, who are also experiencing this, and it's having an impact on their mental health. And I think the broader lesson here is, can we in some way lead with love and sort out the details later instead of leading with judgment?
Ooh, that is optimistic and something I don't.
Well, let me finish by saying I don't think it's going to happen.
Okay.
But that's my hope for the world.
We both made like huge, grandiose statements that were both like, no.
Yeah, whatever,
In a utopian world, but
I'm seeing. I think that this is a broader problem, is that we're trying to match something up to the pandemic, but we can't because we've never really experienced anything this big before. Like I'm watching the county where I live, work really, really hard to provide something like school for my kids with the online thing and the worksheets and whatever. And it is probably better than, most places in the country, but it's not adequate. It's kind of ridiculous. And the thing I care the least about right now is whether my 9-year-old is learning algebra, right? And I'm not going to be pushing real hard to make sure that they're doing everything right with the technology and all that stuff. It's like that. I think at some point you have to admit that it's like, well, you can't just recreate something to adjust to something that you don't know how to deal with at all. It's not the same thing as being in school. Doing teletherapy, we have some science about how it's just as effective for the treatment of OCD and related disorders. So you can disseminate CBT effectively via teletherapy. And there might be certain aspects of it that aren't the same, but it doesn't really impact the quality of the care.
Yep.
Right. And this isn't a dig against online schooling. I'm just saying scrambling to try to give my kids an elementary school experience on Zoom is stupid. And I don't want to do it. And I don't want them to think that they are failing at it when they just don't feel like they're learning, and they don't feel like they feel like they're constantly confused about what's expected of them. I would rather that they were making paper mache hats. That seems like a much better use of their time right now than trying to derivate a verb or whatever it is that they do in school. Like, this, like, why now? Well, can we just, I mean, we pay taxes and, my kids go to public school. And so that money, is there. So on the government side of the bargain, they're going to be providing an education for my children. And so they're trying to do what we've been paying them for. So I understand that, but they can't, they can't give me and my family what we paid for. I don't fault them for trying, but if you know that you can't, maybe that money should just be, given to the teachers, and we just call it a day, and we'll adjust the curriculum for next year. We'll pick up where we started off. And look, I mean, this is just my personal experience. I mean, different. I'm sure it's different in different states and different aged kids and things like that. But I see it as, again, it's an example of a larger issue, which is we're scrambling to provide the same quality of something to match an experience that is so much bigger than that. And we're just not willing to admit that we can't do it.
The key word being experience.
Yeah.
Because it is even just as you mentioned before, your routine and going here and going there, that's the bigger part of being part of a school, is being able to be there and interact with other kids. And my fear is, what are they losing by losing the opportunity to be around their classmates? The flip side of that is, what are people gaining that get bullied at school? Or, so it's...
but also, what are people losing who get bullied at home, where school is the place where they don't get bullied?
Yes.
So it's not great. It's, the situation's not ideal, but I do get concerned about additional suffering coming from trying to put a square peg in a round hole, when really what we should be doing is trying to just love each other and keep each other safe as best we can, and model for each other, some kind of sense of, we can get through this, we'll figure it out. Not like, oh, it has to be this way, we got to make sure it's exactly this way, and if it, we're going to fall behind, and everything that mattered before matters in the exact same way. Well, it doesn't. You know, it has to. You have to be flexible. You have to adjust for it. So,
this is going to be a time of our lives in every generation, I guess, that you do have that opportunity to learn that exactly what you said. You know, you can be flexible, or you can hold fast to what you think things should be because they used to be. And I think it's going to be a true testament, not only personally, but just as a society, whether that be individual states or whether that be wherever you're at. I think it can be exciting or it can be terrifying depending on the day.
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, and I think that people with OCD, just bringing it back to that, and I shouldn't assume that it's more so true for people with OCD than for anybody with any kind of mental health challenge, but you know, they're used to being brave. I mean, even before they came to therapy, they were kind of braving their way through their experience, you know, and they came through therapy because they figured it shouldn't have to be this hard. There must be something I'm missing. Maybe somebody can help me to suffer less. So I think people who maybe are a little bit used to the universe not doing what they expect it to, whether it's inside their head or otherwise, have a certain skill set for adjusting to this, that people who, you know, aren't struggling with those kinds of challenges find completely novel, and then that maybe pushes them to overdo it.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's
good word that comes to mind for me is resiliency.
Yeah.
That's what I see that in myself and so many of my clients, of just and their response to this is, yeah, I'm so used to the world just being shitty anyway. Well, this is happening, and it's kind of like, well, it's interesting to watch everybody else when my world's been shit since I was 8.
Well, I think also a lot of people, you know, we talk about uncertainty tolerance in OCD, and you know, an obsession is basically just a thing you don't accept uncertainty about. And if you accepted uncertainty about it, it wouldn't be an obsession. It could still suck, but it wouldn't be an obsession. Mm-hmm. And many people with OCD, not all of them, but many people with OCD are having to make the choice to accept uncertainty about things that arise in consciousness that they notice that other people don't notice. But if it's not their target obsession, it doesn't take much out of their day. So you might be a person with sexual orientation obsessions, and you're driving along and you have a thought, well, what if I just turn my car into oncoming traffic? And something happens and you're like, oh, you know, and you just kind of go back to what you were doing. You're kind of used to thinking that way and accepting uncertainty about that thing. And so that gives you, I mean, that's what I think is really interesting about when thinking about uncertainty. It's not that people with OCD are bad at accepting uncertainty. It's that there's a deficit in accepting uncertainty about a specific aspect of their experience, but they're actually really good at accepting uncertainty about a whole lot of things. Otherwise, everybody with OCD would be totally incapacitated all the time.
All day.
Because we think about so much more than just our target theme or our target content. We just understand that I'm much more aware of those things than the average person. It's just, there's always sort of something that gets us where it's like, okay, I can't just blow that one off. That this must be important. I can't seem to let it go. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there's obviously a lot of uncertainty out there right now with the pandemic. And so I do think that a lot of people with OCD have one kind of might be slightly more prepared for going like, yeah, I don't know how that's going to turn out, but you know, I didn't know how my breakfast was going to turn out either. It didn't kill me. So, you know, I'm kind of used to not knowing things, you know, as long as it's not about my current obsession, I think I'm okay.
I really appreciate that explanation, and may quote you later about it. I think it's such an important distinction, and sometimes it escapes me on how to communicate, whether that be to clients or just in general, how it is that I could worry all day, every day, whether I'm a pedophile or a murderer, you know, and then, you know, I could care less about finances at times, or, you know, these things over here, or, oh, I had a fight with Sean, and yeah, whatever, it'll work out. You know, things that could really ruin people, or their day or their life. And I'm just like, that'll work out. But by the way, I really hope I don't molest a child today.
Yeah. Not today, you know. Yeah, it's interesting how the mind works. I mean, I'm seeing from a lot of my clients, as it relates to COVID, there are some who are just dealing with the frustration of not being able to continue the work the way that they were,
Yes.
and part of the work was getting into a pattern of consistent behavior, whether it was going to your job or school or something like that. And now that that's been disrupted, and again, it's kind of therapy being a separate issue, because I do think teletherapy is effective. Trying to do an online version of a lot of the things that we were doing, for some people it's better than being isolated, absolutely, but I think for a lot of people it can make things worse. Or maybe there's like a critical mass after which, it's like a certain amount of it is good. So talking to my friends, on the phone or on Skype or something like that, it's probably good that I stay in touch with them. But if I'm doing too much of it, it starts to bum me out. It's like a constant reminder that I can't be near them. So it's almost like I'd rather put my attention on reading a book or something. So,
can I don't want to interrupt you, but I do want to comment, because I think this is a good segue into something I wanted to talk about. I just had this conversation with my husband, Sean, this morning. I woke up and this is an early fireside chat. So I was just like, whoa, I got to get all this stuff done. And so I woke up, I'm doing work. And then I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to Denver in a little bit, which is an hour's drive. It's like going to the big city, even though I used to live there. And in my mind, I was like, okay, let's do this, and this today. And then in the process of being Denver, I wanted to stop by the track and do a workout. And I thought, what if the track's not open? And then all of a sudden it was this flood of a reminder of where we are.
Yeah.
And the thought of, I was going to stop by the store, and, I'm just not a mask person. Sorry, everyone. Y'all can judge me all you want, but I'm not wearing a mask. Like, I get more claustrophobic in it. I start to hyperventilate. And the last thing I want is to have a panic attack in the back of Safeway because I'm wearing a mask, and then everybody think I'm having a seizure because of COVID, And so that's my choice. But I thought to myself, all of a sudden it was this doom. And two things came out of this. One, the sadness of, fuck, this is where we're at. And I all of a sudden had this vision of my day, and it looked good. And then I remembered where we're at. But then two, it scared me because I didn't wake up in gloom and doom, because this is where we're at. And I thought, I'm starting to desensitize to this. And that also presented some fear. In a way,
you're concerned with not feeling strong enough about what's happening.
Because I had such and people that have been watching the Fireside Chats know that first 2 weeks, it was like every other day I felt like I was falling apart. And, some days would be good. And then it was just this, wreck of guilt, and felt, trauma from it, and sadness, and this and this. And now I can feel myself moving out of that and more into an acceptance piece. So here's the comparison, and it's going to sound really weird. The last thing we want is to feel okay with school shootings. We don't want to feel that, but they were happening so much that you'd see a headline and you didn't have those, oh my gosh, the whole day is going to stop. I can't believe this is happening. It just became kind of this norm. And then I'm going to go on and do my day. And so I don't know if this makes any sense, but I had those two feelings this morning. And I thought, thank goodness we're doing a fireside chat and I can get my mind off of this, because they were big feelings, but they were different, and they were a little unnerving.
Well, the thing is, it's exactly what you're supposed to be going through. I mean, that's what's interesting about this, is everybody is an expert and nobody is an expert. None of us have gone through this. Normally something happens to my clients and I'm like, oh, that's messed up. Let me help them with that. But it's happening to me too. It's happening to all of us at the same time. There hasn't been this kind of neutralizer in my lifetime. there have been traumatic events. There's been 9/11, school shootings and things like that, but it hasn't been, it's always been something that happened to people I know, or to me, but not them, or to them and not me, but never to all of us. And that sort of changes things. And so that is one area where I think people who struggle with OCD and related disorders are having a harder time, is that the OCD is looking for something to latch onto. COVID itself is too big to latch onto. It's not personal enough. So the question is, how am I screwing this up? And what it seems to be manifesting the most with is I'm not responding to this the right way. As if there were a right way to respond to a pandemic emotionally. And you should know this because of all the pandemics that you've been through, right?
I've watched The Walking Dead. I know how I would feel in that.
Yes. That show started as a delightful traumatic experience and then just evolved into.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, but there is that sense that you should just intuitively know how to respond to this. That if you were a good person, you would be, crying this amount and worrying this amount and reading the news this amount and obsessing this amount and catastrophizing this amount in the exact right amounts, and it becomes like an eating disorder of emotions where you're measuring all of your responses. To what end? Just to know what, and and then you go through these moments of like, oh, I'm dealing with this really, really well. I'm so proud of myself. And then, 5 minutes later, you're freaking out about something related to it, as if that was good and this is bad. But no, they're actually both totally normal responses.
So black and white.
Well, but they were that's how you respond to this.
Exactly.
Right? The way you respond to something that's never happened before is the right way.
I know.
That's it across the board.
Important to hear that reminder. Yeah. I
think honestly, I see there's a lot of commentary out there, and I get it. It's not for a bad reason, but this thing about hoarding of supplies, and stuff. I'm not talking about like, I bought all the hand sanitizer and I'm going to sell it at an inflated rate on eBay. I'm talking about
those good people.
I got as much toilet paper as they let me buy, even though I wasn't sure I was going to need it all. I'm seeing a lot of really unfair criticism against people who are doing that, right? Like they're doing it. Many of them are just doing it because they're afraid that they're not going to be able to leave the house and they're going to need toilet paper. And they're just responding to their fear in a way that's not totally irrational. And it's just scaring you because they got there first and now there's no toilet paper. So you're angry at them. But they're not necessarily, it's not to say that they're all responding perfectly. Some people might have other designs in mind. But my guess is most of the people that we're thinking of who are walking out of the store with all this toilet paper or whatever it is, they're responding in a perfectly appropriate way to their fear. How did you get to be the arbiter of truth of the pandemic? How many pandemics have you been through that puts you on this high horse, So that's saddening to see.
The key words being unfair criticism, because that is what I feel is really, I may be kind of distancing myself from everything because I have just stopped on social media because I get pulled into the emotional, the emotional plays of the unfair criticism and not understanding. And I think I'm definitely not elevating people with OCD, but I will say we tend to have just this empathy, this natural, way of being able to detect human suffering, things like that, and understand more sides. Not everybody with OCD, but in general, I would say that, because when you experience human suffering to the degree that most of us have, there just is, we just have that. It changes your worldview. That's the easiest way to say it. And so I'm just so sensitive to watching exactly what you're saying. I've never gotten on. I did get kind of pissed off that I couldn't find any toilet paper. I'm just like, I've got to have toilet paper. But I just ordered it on Amazon. It's in the closet right behind me. I have 8 rolls that are this big. They're half ply, so we're gonna have a bad time for these next 6 months.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like I'm getting to know you at a level that I would not have imagined. early in our relationship. That's okay.
But anyway, let's move off of that. I should just bring one out for y'all and show it.
I
It's
think when you
huge.
meet people and one of the first subjects you discuss are groinal sensations, there's not really a lot of, where do you go from there, So this is really not.
So anyway, I don't even know what I was saying.
We were talking about unfair criticism. We were talking about unfair criticism of people who are responding to this out of fear.
Yeah, and I think that's what's making me the most angry, and you are correct, and it's important to bring that back. No one knows how to go through this pandemic. It's all it's all a personal response, and every response is okay except for shaming other people. That is not okay. And that's what I think personally has hurt myself and hurt a lot of people. I've had many clients that are struggling with the shame of, I need to get out of the house and exercise every day. It's part of my mental health. I cannot stay cooped up in here. It makes mental health worse. But when I go outside and I'm jogging on a trail and I'm not wearing a mask, I'm getting really awful looks and I'm getting awful comments. And it's just like, that's what's really, I think, harming people. And what I am afraid of, if we kind of go back, once this all clears and we're trying to return back to the new normal, where is that divide going to fall, and how do we adjust and normalize from there?
Yeah. Well, we have another problem that's worse than the pandemic, and it's lying. I would like to see less lying. And yes. I seem to consistently witness more lying. And again, I don't blame the virus for just doing its job. And I don't blame people for not knowing how to contain it the moment they just learned what it was. But to have not learned what it was at the same time that everybody else did would suggest you were getting bad information. And to be consistently promoting bad information and disseminating bad information, like, I don't know, a virus, I'd like to see less of that. That's the thing that really gets under my skin. That's the thing I'm afraid of desensitizing to. Like, personally speaking, I'm not afraid of desensitizing to, okay, so there's a virus out there, it's killing lots of people. Okay, that's not under my control. And if I'm feeling emotional about it, fine. And if I'm not going to judge myself for that. I am afraid of becoming desensitized to just things that are untrue.
Yeah, the response.
That are just, and you're seeing it wherever it is that you're seeing it. And I noticed like little bits of it. It's like, well, that's what I should expect, right? Well, that's another lie from a lying liar. I don't know what I'm upset about. So I'm not as upset about it anymore. And now I'm part of the problem, but I can't be angry all the time, right? I got work to do, so.
Well, and that's a hard position to be in, I think, because when you do see information disseminated that is untrue, and it's ramping up the hype and the panic, and you can't get as justice people, which you're kind of a justice person. I'm just assuming that about you.
Am I a justice person? I don't know. What does that mean?
Well, meaning like justice is important. Lying is not acceptable.
Okay, I'll take that.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, I would say if you get fired up about people lying, you're a justice person. So, but in being someone who feels that way, not being able to get to the source and correct before it's widespread.
Yeah.
How helpless does that feel?
Yeah, helpless. Yeah, that's how it feels. And comes out, like, just personally speaking, it just comes out in like short dramatic bursts for me. I think it's just part of being a cisgendered white heterosexual American male, is like I'm not conditioned to just sort of have emotions kind of come and go in this like long, beautiful wave that goes up and down. It's more like everything is under control. Everything is back under control. That's how I've sort of learned to process emotions. So I was like exercising, listening to the New York Times Daily podcast today, and they were talking about Asian Americans experiencing racism over this whole thing. And
I know.
and there was some clip of this like little girl who said something like, in response to somebody bullying her, she said something like, it made me not want to be Chinese or something like that. And I'm in the middle of doing all ups and I start bawling while I'm still doing them. And then I was over it, and then I was back to the next exercise. So that's a little glimpse into my world.
I'm going to remember that later today.
Yeah, well, at least nobody's watching this. So
I think that,
yeah.
and those are okay. God, we have to like be careful about the political piece about this, but whatever. I'm just going to say it. That right there is the crux of where I can and at times do. I'm not really. I'm going to violently burst into my emotions. I like, how you said that wonderful wave. Well, my wonderful wave, if I'm angry, will last a really long time, and I don't even care. And that's how I process it, and that's fine. And sometimes it's motivating, and sometimes it's just refreshing to be angry for that long. It's not a beautiful wave, but I deal with it.
Yeah.
But with that said, I think that's what's so scary about these times is the false information and the people when they are fearful in this time. And as we know, people who are faced with massive uncertainty, there's no finish line, there's no way to know what it's going to look like on the other side. People don't know how to manage their emotions. And that's when I feel like the divide, you could say all day long that people with, who are Chinese descent are getting bullied now because of reasons we all know if we watch the news. And then you'll have the other side going, that's not true. That's not happening. And it's not happening in my neighborhood when your neighborhood is all white because you don't ever interact with Chinese people. So you don't know, or just, and that's what's scary.
It's not my experience, therefore it's not true. And the world revolves around me. Yeah.
Or I read an article where a Chinese person said they're not getting bullied, so that means that no one is.
Yeah. And I think, to be, there's a difference in being fair and telling both sides of a story that doesn't really have two sides, which is the problem the media gets into a lot. It says like, here's one take on this and here's another take, as opposed to here's the truth and here's what the liars are saying, right? But in terms of misinformation, it's not 100% coming from one side of things. I think also on the other side of things, out of fear, there's a lot of misinformation out there about how to stay safe. And it's not all useful information. And that does get under the skin of people with OCD and some of the people that I've been working with, where they're doing things that are extrapolations of CDC guidelines that are above and beyond what they need to do to be safe, that are actually creating an environment where they're so ramped up trying to be certain that they're not going to get COVID that they're actually almost as like the horseshoe, they're coming around the other end and engaging in behaviors that might not be good for their health,
right?
Or might cause them to be reckless and make a mistake of some kind. And so when I see evidence of this, it's very uncomfortable for me as a therapist to tell somebody what to do or not do as it relates to this pandemic, because I don't work for the CDC and I'm not an expert, right? I can just go based on what they have on the website, right? And they don't have it on the website, then this other thing that you're doing, I can't guarantee it's not keeping you safer, but I don't think it will. It doesn't seem like it will. It seems like it's just going to tank your mental health. And I'm talking about stuff like, videos that are out there that have to do with like how to handle, the mail or your groceries in the most compulsive way possible. Or how to address like, whether or not your hair brushes up against something or the side of your leg touched a
wiping
box.
down your shoes when you come in the house
after
being at the grocery store.
And it's admittedly complicated, right? I mean, it's not a simple thing of like, you don't have to do that or you do have to do that. And that's where the OCD kicks up and says, well, you better figure this one out, right? And maybe the best bet is to do the least charitable interpretation of the situation, so then you could never be blamed for not having done enough. And that's where I see OCD really thriving in this environment. And we have to work against that. the pressure that people have right now. Don't get COVID. If you get COVID, you lose the game. You failed, and everyone will know you failed, and it must be because you did something stupid. That's how you got it, right? And that's not the truth, right? What we're trying to do right now is not overwhelm the hospital system. That's the point of all this social distancing. And that means, yes, follow the CDC guidelines. And it means, yes, find some personal space where what those guidelines mean to you get reflected in your home, right? And it's not going to be the same for every single person. That's understandable. But but you might get COVID anyway. And so if all the pressure is on don't get COVID, well, the OCD can keep telling you, well, maybe it's not just wipe down your shoes after going to the grocery store. Maybe it's throw your shoes away, right?
Yes.
And so where's it going to end?
It doesn't end.
Yeah. So that's, it's understandably murky territory, but there's the overt lies that are just lies about things, they're just like, no, that's not true kind of lies. And then there's they're not exactly lies, but they're also not truths in the sense of like it's exaggerated information and the presentation of like, and I know because I'm a doctor or I'm a, I read this book or my cousin.
They're the shoulds.
The CDC.
The shoulds.
Yeah. And the shoulds can be, I'm not going to lie. I don't think they're equally toxic, but they can still be pretty toxic as the,
and they're shaming.
Yeah.
They're shaming too. And it's when you go to the OCD realm, then it can be, if you don't do this, then this or else. And it's it's overkill when it isn't simple. I can't say it's just simple. Go to the guidelines of the CDC because it's not, because we're human beings and we are going to overthink and we are going to go to worst case scenarios at times, OCD or not. But I guess maybe keep it simple.
Well, I think if you're doing what you think is your best attempt to follow the CDC guidelines or to follow social distancing, and it's different in any way from what I'm doing, maybe I'm doing more than what you're doing, or maybe I'm doing less, I don't know. But if we're all doing what we think is the best that we can do to keep from overwhelming the hospital system, to keep from acquiring and disseminating this virus, then we'll be okay. Then I think the numbers will work out that we'll be okay. It's the people who are not doing anything, who are not participating in this at all because they're getting bad information, or they're participating in it on the opposite side of things in ways that are just destructive to their mental health and not actually keeping them any safer than if they were doing half of that stuff, Yeah. And again, when this is all over, we need healthy people rebuilding society. I can't emphasize that enough. I don't want my kids growing up in a society of traumatized people who are a shell of their former selves, who were on the UFO for however long they were on the UFO, and then just after all of the probes and experiments were just dropped back down to Earth to be their teachers and their guidance counselors and their dentists. We need well people to help us piece this mess back together.
I agree. And I want to, before I get your final thoughts, because we need to wrap up.
Those are my final thoughts.
Well, think of some more while I say this. I think it's also important my final thoughts are, and I love this discussion. I really appreciate all of your input and just I thank you for going into your experience as well. I think it's going to be really helpful for others to hear how you've been feeling through this. For me, the takeaway and what I've really tried to emphasize is people, in the realm of being responsible for what we are going through, please be empathetic and reserve shame for what people need and are doing in right now in order to cope, in order to keep their mental health strong, in order to, some people just have to get out of the house and drive. Some people need to go on a trail. Some people, really, to me, I have to get out every day. If I don't, I start to get into my head and things get really ugly for me. So just reserving that shame and judgment and thinking about exactly what you said. This is something we've never been through before. So we're all going through it together. And there's One day I may wake up and feel a certain way, and the next day I may feel something different. And so it's important to understand that we as a society and we as individuals can meet each other where we're at and maybe even understand where we're coming from and be somebody that can be there and maybe just to listen or to wave to. We had a fireside chat the other day with McGrath and Margaret. It's like, you know what, just get out on your curb and wave to people, because sometimes even just that little human connection can really just turn things around.
Yeah. That's
so those
true.
are my final thoughts. What are yours?
Those are great final thoughts. Perhaps the best final thoughts I've heard in a while, and I really want to commend you on the finality of your thoughts and how final. Yeah. Just keep coming back to this moment. So easy to spend all day in the stories about what could have happened or should have happened or will happen or might happen. And if you check in with this moment, whatever's right in front of you, there's something that's going okay. Maybe everything is going, like right now in this moment, everything is going my way. Talking to somebody I enjoy talking to. I'm in this, comfortable home office, I'm feeling healthy, and that's great. But another moment I could be anxious or depressed and irritated, and I could look around and see all the things I don't like. But if you're really paying attention, you'll always find something that's still working. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. You don't want to lose sight of that. If that's the thing to be afraid of losing sight of completely, because then you're going to suffer immeasurably. If you want to reduce your suffering, look for that thing that in this moment is going all right. It didn't become less important just because of the pandemic or what it's going to bring next.
Thank you. And thank you for being on, John. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you. If you want to know more about John, he's got, it's funny, like I wrote on the intro or the thing, I was just like, John has this incredible meme series, yada, yada, yada. It's so funny. And then I'm like, oh, and by the way, he wrote 1,000 books. So if you want to know more about John, please go to ocdbaltimore.com, one of the greatest websites for OCD information and content. Thank you for that. I always refer it to people. They love it. And thank you for being here today and joining us for this fireside chat. We're going to continue to show up for you every week and having really personal discussions of how we're being impacted by this so we can walk alongside you as you're trying to navigate this as well. Next week, we will have Ethan Smith and Dr. Robert Lance are on. I don't know times and days, so check that. Look for it at OCD Gamechangers website, no, not website, Facebook page. I will post a meme on Sunday to let you know the times and dates so you can mark it. Thank you again. I hope wherever you're at that you feel a little bit more normalized and okay for how you are navigating this really unprecedented time of uncertainty. We are right here with you, and we will continue to show up for you and help to let you know that you're not alone and walk alongside you at this time. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you next week.